So, thank you, Ken, for the previous walkthrough on winterizing trees. Now, Ken already mentioned a lot of things that I'm going to discuss further about tropical bonsai for winter. And there is some overlap between how you want to consider what your trees need when they're outside or when they're inside. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about this tree as my case study. So I've had this tree 15 years now, and it does not have to take that long to get a tree from a cutting to this stage. 12 of those years, I did not know what I was doing. So now I've learned a few things, and I can tell you how to get there faster. So here I am. Let's see. This was 17 years ago when I first got a bonsai tree from Franklin Park Conservatory. And
is that you on the right?
That is me on the right. I used to have bleach blonde hair, and that's my sister, and here I am today. So Franklin Park Conservatory does do something for the club, and it's kind of nice that I've been able to come back here and give back to the Columbus Club now. Okay, here I am about 2 years ago at my bonsai teacher's garden in Seattle, and that is me after I de-wired one of Dan Robinson's black pines that he's grown from seed. So again, trees can be grown from seeds or cuttings and turn into very beautiful bonsai within our lifetimes. And for tropical bonsai, there are tools that we need to make that happen faster since we don't live in a tropical place. So those tools are what's going to allow the plant to grow faster and then allow us to save time. So instead of 17 years, maybe you can do this in only 5 years, for example. Okay. Also on my background, you might have noticed my lab coat. I do work now for the Ohio State University, and I am a microbiologist. So when I'm thinking about bonsai, I know it's very much an art form, and that is true. You can work on intuition a lot, but I also look at the science behind it, and I think we all do that to some extent, but we might not acknowledge how much that is playing a role. And also I'll point out, since I work for OSU, I am a teacher, and we're going to be doing some active learning today, so everyone's going to have to get to know your neighbors. I know it might have been a while since you've been in a classroom type setting, but dig deep, and it'll be a little more fun and interactive that way. Okay, so let's start with this. Introduce yourself to those around you. I know we have some new people here today, and just talk about, for a few minutes, have you tried doing bonsai indoors before, and what difficulties have you faced? And when you're answering the question about what difficulties you've had, hold on to that, whatever list you come up with, and we'll see if by the end you've answered, or I've answered all of those challenges, or if there are others that you still want to ask about. So I'll give you a few minutes to discuss. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. So, important announcement. I've just learned that the conservatory is closing at 4 today, so I'm very glad to see all of the discussion that has started, and you can continue it after we finish. So, remember, hold on to the challenges that you face in growing indoors. So, Ken already mentioned temperature. He said, if you have a bonsai tree that's tropical and it's still outside, you might as well throw it away. And that is pretty much true, so I hope everyone's brought theirs in. If you have a tree that is in this category and it's not inside yet, here are the problems you'll face. So, I think most people will be familiar with this idea of hardiness zones. Basically, the US Department of Agriculture has classified the entire US in terms of a zone based on their most extreme winter temperature. And we are zone 6, that green one. So any tree that can grow in zone 6 can be outside year-round. Tropical trees will be like this orangey red area in South Florida, South California. Those are zone 10 and above. And those are trees that absolutely cannot handle having a hard freeze. If they get frozen, they'll probably die. So whenever you get a new species of tree, or if you want to find out what special needs that species might be, a good place to start is looking up the hardiness zone for that species. Okay, and a good contemporary example of why this is so important is, if you remember, it might have been last winter, there was that gigantic winter storm in Texas, which South Texas, East Texas, like the Houston area, they don't normally get these types of winter storms. And you can see, oh, I pushed the button. You can see it caused $600 million in agricultural damage, and that's just from plants that aren't usually expecting frozen temperatures, freezing weather, getting damaged by this snow and ice that accumulates in this case, this storm was over the course of a week. So prolonged exposure to cold temperatures will kill tropical plants, and it will kill it by this mechanism. So these ice shards that are accumulating in the plant when there is freezing weather, they will actually puncture the membrane of the plants and the cells, and then those cells will break and die. Kind of like, I think Ken mentioned this as well, in reference to frost. So, but our hardy plants have mechanisms to resist this or to fix this once it does happen. And in this model organism, this was an Arabidopsis plant, not important, sorry, too much information, but they actually stained this plant cross-section of a leaf for this membrane healing protein. And so you can see it's hanging out around the edges of all of the membranes, waiting for damage so that it can respond. But tropical plants do not have this type of repair mechanism. Okay, so if we know the freezing temperatures are bad, what temperatures do we expect to be optimal for growth? So as long as it's above freezing, is any temperature fine? Kevin, you have an idea?
65 or above.
65 or above. For what type of tree?
Tropical.
For a tropical tree? That could be true. Let's find out. Okay, so I found another study. You'll see that I've done this throughout. I found some studies in the plant literature that we can apply to bonsai. So here, they were researching the rate of photosynthesis in a number of species based on a variety of temperatures. And for all of these, 3 of these species are more hardy, winter hardy species, and the Mexican cotton is a tropical plant. And you'll see that the optimal the optimal temperature for photosynthesis varies by the species, but the tropical species hasn't even peaked in terms of photosynthetic activity at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So for tropical species, warmer temperatures are better. Oh, yeah, I have that nice label there. The only thing is, our average winter home temperatures, if you are very cheap, it might be like 60 degrees. If you have the heater on all the time and you like a warm environment, it might be upper 70s. That's probably the only range that we're going to give these plants. Okay, so you might say, if the plant needs warm air, let me put my plant right next to the heat source of my house, right next to the radiator. Rob, you're shaking your head no. Why is that? Yep, you're going to dry the leaves out because this radiator, your heat vent, is just blasting out dry, hot air. And then this is going to dry out the leaves and your tree will probably die. So it is a good idea to have the tree in a warm place in your house, but you want some distance between the heat source and the tree. Okay, so here's where we get to the tools. So for temperature, strategic placement in your house is probably the first thing I would think about when you're working with tropical species. You want somewhere that's warm, doesn't get really cold temperatures, and you might have it in the same area as a heat source, but not right next to it. Also, reflective sheeting, like in my grow tent, or a greenhouse that maybe is next to your window. You could kind of have, some people have tabletop greenhouses, that type of thing. Those will also retain heat well and can elevate the temperature for your tropical tree. Okay, now we move on to the next important subject, which Ken has also mentioned, light. So how much light do our plants need for photosynthesis? So this is something I came across a number of years ago. Someone by the name of Columbus Bonsai went out and measured with a light reader the amount of light in all of these different scenarios. So he has, some are full sun, and in terms of the unit of light levels, there's 100,000 lux for a full sun day in the summer. And then bright overcast, about half that, 50,000, and then heavy overcast, about 1/10 of a bright day, so 10,000. And then the home interior falls in this range. So even if you're next to a south-facing window, there's only 3,000 lux or light units at that south-facing window. That's because it's just such a small space for the light to enter through from the sun. And if you have it on another windowsill, that's only 500 lux. And if you put it, let's say, on this desk, very far away from all the windows, that will be even less. So adding light is a very important thing if you want your little seedling or your cutting to become a more mature bonsai in a tropical setting or with a tropical species. Now, I found another study which was looking at light levels and correlating it to the amount of growth that the plants made in a 2-week period. So here they have the amount of dry weight of the plant and the amount of leaf area as 2 metrics for total growth. And you'll see this 500 lux, this line G, is equivalent to the other windowsill scenario in your house. And you'll see that the plant is growing very slowly. You almost can't detect any growth in a 2-week setting. Line C is more analogous to a nice south windowsill, and then B and A would be things that you would achieve if you had supplemental lighting. And these light levels, for them, they achieved it all with external artificial lighting. So A and B are definitely, you could find artificial lights that will match those levels. And you can see how much more the growth is just in this 2-week period. Okay, so if we know that light is beneficial and our plants need light in order to grow, and you want your cutting to turn into a nice big bonsai as fast as possible, why not leave the lights on 24/7? Philip, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, because lights need rest just like people.
That's a good explanation. So plants do need rest, and there have also been studies that looked at changing the photo period or the amount of time that the plants are exposed to light. And so this experiment was done on strawberry plants, and their output variables are looking at leaf area, and they're also looking at the fruit yield, because as an agriculture crop, they're very interested in what setting is the best for getting the maximum amount of marketable strawberries. And you can see here that just by looking at the leaf area, 12 hours may not be optimal, but then 14 hours, the leaf area peaks, and this is also reflected in the dry weight. And then 16 hours and 24 hours, there's no additional benefit for that. So maybe you put your cutoff at 14 hours of light. Also in the fruit, they actually said the number of fruits and the marketable yield peaked under 12 hours. So maybe again, this 12 to 14 hour window will be the best for your indoor plant lights. And like Philip said, there is something that's happening inside the plant. If you give it too much light, it's not really getting a chance to repair. So that explains those findings. Okay. So for lighting, we've already discussed you can get grow lights. And there's a lot of different grow lights out there. I would say any grow light is better than no grow light. You don't need to go too far in the weeds. They have small versions, like this little LED light strip, and that's very flexible. You can put it on a bookshelf or wherever you want it to go. They also have larger, oh, I pushed the button again. Okay, they also have larger halogen and LED lights, like what I have inside of my grow tent, and I'll show you that later. And they come in all shapes and sizes, so you can really find one that works for your, whatever area you've decided to grow your bonsai. Also, a nice outlet like this will be very useful to control the timing of that light. You don't have to be the one to turn it on and off. This will turn it on at the same time every day, turn it off at the same time every day. And there are inexpensive versions of these as well, so you don't have to invest too much money in one year. Okay. The next topic is humidity. So we've already discussed a little bit about humidity and how you don't want to dry out your plants in reference to the radiator kind of context of why you don't want to put your plant right next to your house heat source. So the typical indoor home humidity is between 15 and 35% in the winter. And compare that against what our plants are used to in the summer if they're outdoors in Columbus. So that would be north of 60 to 70%. And this is why it's an issue for bonsai trees. So there was another study that looked at photosynthetic activity correlated against humidity levels. You'll just see here that the dry air had the lowest levels of photosynthesis, the humid air had the highest levels of photosynthesis, and The only other interesting thing on this graph is that they did notice that the plant got better adapted or acclimatized to its conditions over multiple days. So this is day 5 in the same conditions, and this is day 1. But even after day 5, the dry air conditions have not been able to photosynthesize as well as the humid air. And that is because of the way that your plants lose water. So I think this is probably review for a lot of people, but inside of each of your leaves, there's thousands of these stomatas, and the stomata open and close to allow for gas exchange. And in this gas exchange is what provides food for the plant. The plant can lose water through these stomata, and it can also lose water just from evaporation through the waxy cuticle, which is designed to prevent loss of water. But it doesn't totally prevent loss of water. So there's some water loss from both the cuticle and the stomata, and once the plant is stressed for water by dry air, for example, the amount of water lost from the cuticle is much higher, and the stomata close, and the plant no longer gets energy, or no longer can get gas exchange, no longer makes energy. Okay, so in bonsai, there are other contexts where it's beneficial to have humidity. A major one for tropical bonsai is making aerial roots. This plant, even though I've had it 15 years, has never given me aerial roots until last year. And that is because last year is the first year I had it inside of that grow tent. You also want humidity when you're doing a graft. So this is from Bonsai Tonight with Jonas. He wraps his scion grafts in this plastic bag that has sphagnum moss. And then that increases the humidity in that area while the scion graft is growing and taking and fusing to that branch. Okay, so for humidity, you can use a spray bottle. The only problem with that is that it's very dependent on how often you remember or are able to add that humidity manually into the system. There's also humidifiers which you can use. And then again, a greenhouse will kind of make its own microenvironment, trap all the water there, so that also can benefit your plants. And then in the bonsai world, it's very popular for people to sell humidity trays. I'm a little bit skeptical about how well they work, so I was wondering if any of you have experience with humidity trays, and if you've seen any benefit from that. Kevin?
I tried and it didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything? What about you, Mark?
I have humidity trays, but they're not like in the picture where they're just small, basically bigger than the pot. They're the plastic boot trays you can buy to put by your front door, filled with gravel, plants. You know, they're this big. I find that they do help a lot.
Okay.
But then I think having multiple plants grouped together on top of those stones is real.
Yeah, that makes sense, because multiple plants, more water might be more effective at keeping that local microenvironment more humid.
Yeah, it's when I was done it's been very microfondate.
Okay.
It doesn't go, because I did some testing with just spilling water all over the floor and seeing how long it took and checking with my humidity gauges, and it raises it a little, but it's very localized.
I see. Well, that's exactly the kind of information I was hoping someone would have, so thank you, Mouse.
Yeah, if you look at your gravel terrain, it's dry, you go, oh, did I forget to water the plant?
Yeah, there is that benefit too. So maybe humidity trays do help a little bit. And again, in all of these tools, you don't have to adopt every single one of them. So you can start with 1 or 2 and then see how your plant responds and build from there.
Actually, just having a fountain.
A fountain?
In the thing helped more than just me splashing water everywhere.
That's a good idea too.
I use humidity trays on some of my indoor smaller stuff, and it seems to do well. Now in my basement, I have a 20-gallon aquarium, which just has
A giant humidity
power
tray.
filter and air circuits on it. That really helps to stay heated.
So I guess you have to pick up another hobby to really add to the
Ken, do you have fish in that aquarium?
No,
So it's just for humidity?
yeah.
Because I do the same thing. There's a aquarium next to the bonsai that the goldfish from the pond go in, and I tend to let that evaporate as much as possible so the power filter trickles and makes an active splash into the water, and that I think is more effective than anything.
Do you save that water for plant food?
Yeah, oh, it's excellent.
Uh,
Yeah, because it gets loaded with ammonia, especially if you have too many fish or that fall.
so maybe these two hobbies go hand in hand after all.
They do.
David, do you have something?
Yeah, I found drop off effectiveness in the trace once things got a little bit height on them. I use them a lot for them. They got some short sparks, so I just drop off.
That makes sense.
But any tropical trees that I put on them, they're more than seedlings, but it's their own result.
I see.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the way it has to evaporate the higher up it
Yeah.
gets, but, that's why I think the fountain works better.
Yeah.
Because again, it more chance for it to get into the air.
Well, thank you all for that information. I also have another question for you all. So on the topic of airflow, I tried to find papers that researched this. I could only find people doing like indoor lettuce farming, but it didn't really seem applicable to bonsai. So I was wondering, how important do you think airflow is for keeping tropical bonsai? David?
Very, very important. I've grown commercial vegetables and seen the same problem. It's very akin to what I've seen in some problems.
So what problems are you seeing, like fungal issues or?
Well, some fungal issues those are easily taken care of. You start things from seeding and then things grow, and hardens keeps your shape. If you don't have airflow, it will not harden, and then once it gets taller, it falls over.
I see. So that might be something to consider as well. I have found not quite academic research, but the marijuana industry is really big on indoor growing. So I found some recommendations from them, and that's what ultimately made me get my own grow fan. But they suggest having a fan that can circulate. If you have a grow tent or a greenhouse, they want you to be able to circulate the volume of air inside of that grow tent every minute. And this will prevent fungal issues. And for that small of a grow tent, my fan in there is overkill, and I found the cheapest fan I could find. So if you have a very small grow tent, it's pretty manageable. You could also, if you have one of those tabletop greenhouses that doesn't have a vent, you could just open it every now and then and make sure everything is still healthy and there's no mold accumulating. And if there is mold, you can clean it before it gets to be an issue on your plant. Okay, so I think that just about covers it. But also, if you're just having your tree in the open inside of your house, you might place it in a room that has a fan built in that you use periodically. Do you have a question, Kevin?
Yeah, does this airflow consideration also go into outdoor with greenhouses and cold frames in that way as well?
Yeah, it probably would. I would feel like my intuition is just based on what are the trees experiencing when they're outside. Outside is the model environment. It's where everything grows the best. And we're just trying to capture some of those best practices here indoors. So even if you have a greenhouse or if you have a cold frame, you probably want to let some fresh air in there every now and then for the plants. Okay, so now I know I might have thrown a lot of extra information that you don't really need in order to grow your bonsai well, but the only thing you need is to keep in mind these 4 pillars about the basic needs of our plants when we're growing them indoors. And all of these 4 pillars are based on, like I said, what the plants need when they're outside, what they normally experience and what they're used to and evolved for. Okay, so just to recap, warm temperatures will avoid having your tropical trees have freezing damage. And then warm temperatures, light, and humidity all contribute to extra photosynthesis. And humidity also will add to the formation of aerial roots, like on this tree. And airflow will prevent fungal issues. So, if you remember nothing else, remember this slide. And I'll also say, I threw in this example just to say, you don't really need to go all out and spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars for your tropical bonsai. You can, like I've been saying, you can just start piecewise, add one element at a time, and see how your plant benefits from that. There are tropical bonsai that are beginner-friendly and relatively low light tolerant. Like this tree is one of those species. It's Hawaiian umbrella tree. This was grown indoors for 12 years, well actually more like 15 years, with no supplemental lighting, no supplemental anything except for a small humidity tray, just by a window. The only thing is, like I said, it grew very slowly in that time. So however much you want to invest in your plant, you'll get more return on investment in your plant's growth. And this tree is another example. You can get pretty healthy looking plants without anything. This is one of my friend's mom's trees, and she likes looking at the bonsai but has no interest in actually styling it, so it's okay for her if it grows very slowly. So, also, on the topic of this tree, putting it outside in the summer really helps it grow, because then you don't have to even try to emulate that ideal environment. It's already there for you, and the sun is much more powerful than any grow light. And once I started doing that and I put it in a larger pot, then it really was able to transform much faster. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Philip?
LED lighting, the guy on the forum said practices need 1,000 lumens or LUX.
Mm-hmm.
So I stuck the meter up to mine, it's got 4 of them, it's got 1,000 right there next to it.
Mm-hmm.
But down here at the ficus, it's only got 200s.
Yeah.
Anything to
Discuss the inverse square.
Yeah, that is an important
Yeah.
topic I forgot to include. So let's go back to the lighting slide. I'll show you in this picture. See just how close the plants are to that light. So basically, light weakens, like Ken was saying, in an inverse relationship to the square. So for every 1 meter, the power of the light is n meters to the second, 1 over n to the second. So the light is just much more weak if you have the light far away. So my suggestion is to have the light as close to the top of the plant as you can. Some lights will also give off heat, so you want to, if the leaves are getting crispy and burning, you want to raise it a bit, but the closer it is, the more light the plant is getting. That's the most important thing to consider.
LED shop lights, that's not a problem. I probably want them about right here, but I could put them right down against there. They don't create enough heat to burn them.
I know, I was doing seedlings like that, usually they were up under the hood.
Oh, yeah.
And while we're on the topic of lighting, I have one strong light at the top here, and then I have some very small ones at the bottom. So the small ones at the bottom generate no heat pretty much. They can be right up against those. And then my larger trees, I can feel the heat with my hand, so they need to have some distance there. So this is my setup. I've actually, one other thing I forgot to mention about lighting is I did try halogen lights in the past, and I did that before I ever got a grow tent. So the difference between the halogen and the LED lights is that LEDs use less electricity, but they cost a little bit more to buy at the very beginning if you're going to buy a nice one. And the halogens will cost less, but they'll use more electricity, and eventually you'll have to replace those bulbs. Ken?
Halogen versus metal halide.
Is there?
I don't know. I have a halide light in base. The nice thing is, the wide area, I mean, it's probably, I have to duck to keep hitting my head on it, but my plants are this tall, the light's here. It's just fine.
Plus, it's a lot hotter.
Oh, it's way hotter.
Color spectrum is different too, I believe.
Well, you can get
For your highlight and for your sodium, what kind of sodium?
Yeah, I think mine might be sodium, but yeah, you can get a book somewhere that had, this is all, every bulb made, and it has the choice, all kinds of. I don't worry about it that much, like, put my plants under the rows, that's all.
Yeah, they dry up very much.
They don't seem to.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of lighting, different color spectrums, different wattages. The main thing for me when I first started kind of improving my tropical setting was any grow light is better than no grow light at all. For any beginners out there, adding the grow light will help your tree be much more healthy. And you can kind of change your setup over time, see what works for you. Kevin, did you have a question?
So with the size of your grow tent right there, safely how many trees safely do you think could fit in there for yourself that you would be the max, and then how close are you putting it to your light source?
So I have you might remember that large bougainvillea that I had from the
Okay.
Jim Doyle workshop.
How can I forget?
That takes up about half or 2/3 of this section, and it goes up to about here. And it's kind of running into the umbrella tree in this area, but you can fit that here. And then I can fit another medium small tree at the front. And then the bottom is just however many cuttings I can stuff in. So
Where do you put your fan?
my fan is actually hiding over here. So I'll rotate this so you can see. These grow tents, they have these ducts built in. So you just kind of let it rest there and it pushes the air out. And it also has another duct at the bottom. If you want to get really serious about it, you can add as many fans as you want and all different sides so you can kind of customize it. I chose to only get one fan, like I said, because I'm cheap, and it does the job. So I figured by pulling the air out, and that being my only one fan, there will be also air being pulled in from the other ports. So I avoided having to buy 2 fans that way. But you might try that.
Where did you acquire this equipment?
This, honestly, I think most of it is from Amazon. There are different, I think I saw a specialty, like hydroponic, tropical store
Indoor growers.
in,
Yeah.
Indianola.
Indoor growers.
There's
What
like
city?
3 of them along
It's on Indianola. It's all,
Yeah, there might be some places like that where you can find these as well.
it's all Canvas.
And photographers use these for doing up-close photography. You can get small ones like this relatively cheap.
Yeah, and I did see one of these that was used on Facebook Marketplace last year, but it was too big for my space. So you might find some used on those types of places as well if you're looking to get into it.
I heard that there's an online outfit called Growbuds, Growbuds, and you can guess what their focus is. If you sign up for text alerts about their latest specialty deals, they'll give you 50% off an order. So if you're looking to invest in equipment, that might be a good step to take.
Like, they just want to be your buds. They just want to be your buds, I take it?
Absolutely. Plant friend. Plant friend. Grow friend.
That's all I remember it.
So do you have another question?
Yeah, if the house is 71 degrees, do I need a tent like that?
See, need is a strong word. The plants might benefit, but you don't need it. Like this plant was growing for years without it.
Yeah.
But last year, I would say the presence of aerial roots is a reward for me for investing in that, because this tree never put out any aerial roots before that. But the grow tent really solves multiple of these problems at one time. It's an enclosed environment, so it can have a different humidity and a different temperature in here than outside. The light, which bounces all off of here on these reflective sheetings, also helps it retain heat and be a little bit warmer than your ambient house temperature. And it also has airflow, so it has almost all of these birds killed with one stone.
What do you do for humidity? Do you keep something in there? I mean, am I missing a tree?
Yes,
or
actually, that is one thing that I might consider improving. So on this list, I have never tried adding humidifier. So my ficus, for some reason, even though it's been in here the same amount of time as my umbrella tree, is not wanted to give me aerial roots yet. But if I added a humidifier, that might help. Basically, what I've been doing to get these aerial roots in this setup is every time I water, I'm also spraying everything, especially this one. And other than that, the water can collect at the bottom, and I let that water accumulate over the course of a week,
So it's like,
and it does evaporate for the most part. And then at the end of the week, I vacuum out with a shop vac whatever's left, because if you don't do that, you'll get a bunch of algae growing at the bottom, and it'll be a big mess to clean up in the spring when you're moving everything outside. I spilled some algae on my floor last winter, so the shop vac was an important addition this year.
I actually have one of these, and I use a reptile humidifier, which is basically sits outside of the unit, so you don't have to use up space. It has the hose that goes in. You
Oh.
can set it for the humidity you want, and it just blows out a steam or a cloud of mist.
Yeah.
It's great. It works fantastic.
That's a good idea. What's your name, by the way?
I'm Dan.
Dan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, there's a lot of, if you go on YouTube and check out paludarium builders, that's what they use. They use
Okay.
their little reptile mixtures just like that.
Fantastic.
And they're pretty they're pretty,
They're cheap.
yeah. And you just put them wherever you want them and
Well, I guess just like the reptile people and the fish people, we're trying to make our own microclimate that's like somewhere in the outside world, but not like our home. So that's a good idea. Any other questions? Oh,
Is there like a recommended level of humidity in parts of the building?
I don't know about parts per million. I think most places they use a percent. So I would just say what's similar to our outdoor environment is probably good. I did see in this study, well, they didn't actually measure it in that same unit, but I saw one study that didn't have nice graphs, so I didn't include it. They said that there was not really much benefit above 90% humidity. And again, it probably depends on your species. So if your tropical species are like a desert rose or the jades, any of the jades, they probably don't need the humidity as much because they're used to an arid environment. But the ficus and those equator species that are from rainforest areas, those all will very much benefit from the humidity. Yeah. So to answer your question, I kind of shoot for the normal range, I guess, if I were to pick a specific range. Kevin?
So, since we're in Ohio, there's lots of old houses that are very drafty. No matter
Yes.
how hot
My
you
house is one of them.
try to keep your house, there is the added effect of your own house having the microclimate being cold. Does that affect your humidity level in there because the outside of that being colder than what your house is set to?
It might
Does that make
affect,
sense?
Yes, it might affect your, I guess it will depend where in your house you have it. So this actually goes in my basement. My basement, since I have a leaky house, is a few degrees warmer than the rest of my house. My furnace is also in the basement, so that area is more dry. But even inside the grow tent, it's almost like walled off from the dry air there. So it gets the warmth from the furnace, and then it gets its own humidity from the water that I add to this system. Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize, but your house is almost like a desert in the wintertime when you're running your heater. So,
Yeah.
especially like if you have your tree on a windowsill, you know how most windowsills, you have your duct is next to your window in a lot of places. So you want to make sure too that your air, your duct is not hitting your tree and drying it out. So you can get those little backstops that'll shoot it off in a different direction, or maybe find a better windowsill that you're not going to put in. Because just like the heater itself, that'll kill your tree real quick.
Yeah.
Best indoor setup I ever had was when we lived in an old house on the east side and had steam heat with radiators. And the basement where that boiler was stayed close to about 80 degrees and was quite humid. So the trees loved that. I've never been able to get back to that level. Although I think a little grow cabinet like that would fix a lot of problems.
What variety of ficus is refusing the air?
I'm pretty sure it's a macrocarpa. I could bring it next time. It's the one that I entered into the show last year.
So I wasn't here. But I don't know, they seem to vary, right? Benjaminina, forget it. Unless you're in Florida, and its natural environment's not going to air. Now, other things like indoors, I've seen birthdays that feel small. Didn't even try and get the air. Just all over. So I think some of the varieties seem to air more readily than others.
One thing that might also help, I forgot to mention this, but this is this is the pot that this tree originally came to me in. And if you're growing it in a very small pot like this, it might be more difficult to get aerial roots because it doesn't have as much extra space, extra energy, and extra growth. So pretty much with tropical species, only the healthiest ones will give you aerial roots.
What kind of soil mix are you using? Curious.
Great question. So I use the same mix that my bonsai teacher uses, and that is, in this case, it's about 50% composted pine mulch, and then 25% pumice, 25% lava rock. Yeah.
What was the last one?
Lava rock. So those two are hard to find here, but I save money by not getting akadama, so it kind of balances out.
I was looking at the Superfly, it's got tropical mix, and it seemed real close to that pine pines, lava. I think they would Okinawa too.
Yeah, just conceptually, the thing is, I guess, you don't have to use these exact ingredients, but it's 50% organic and then 25 or 50% inorganic. Actually,
that fits. I did much more
Yeah.
heavier organic with the limited tropical like that.
yeah, like tropicals, they love the water. This one, if you find it in Hawaii, it'll be growing right by a river or something, so you definitely want a more water retentive mix for that. Question?
So, do you have to keep it closed all the time, or how frequently do you open it?
I pretty much just open it when I water because I have that fan that's taking care of the airflow for me. And keeping it sealed is part of what makes it have a good level of humidity, as well as keeping all the light reflected inward. So
Do you keep a remote probe in there for anything for like humidity, temperature?
yeah, that's something I didn't mention, but if you want to get really particular, you could get a temperature probe, you could get a light probe, you could get a humidifier.
I was just thinking like a little weather channel remote thing, see temperature.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not. I guess I would say I have not gotten one of those because I've not added any of the things that can tailor my levels of humidity or my levels of temperature. Yeah. Yeah. But if you want to go that route, you definitely can add complexity.
How much money you want to spend?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's why I said like the little cheapy remote ones, you have the one inside, one outside. That's $50.
Yeah.
That would work.
Philip?
Yeah, just so like my small Arbanus cherry, that would be really beneficial to help it grow and get bigger.
Yeah, and if you even just have one tree or two trees, those tabletop greenhouses might help. I think IKEA sells them, but I guess the issue with those is they don't have airflow, so you have to be very attentive, checking on them every now and then.
Take a small aquarium.
That could work too.
Well, then again, that nail polish.
Okay. So I'm told that the conservatory closes in 10 minutes. So if you have any other questions.
We can stay as long as we want.
Okay.
What are you gonna do?
Let them come throw us out.
Well, I'll just tear down the PowerPoint. You can ask any other questions that you have anytime.
Thank you.
If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Hope everyone has learned something about what's going on inside of your plants and how you can keep your tropical bonsai healthy during winter. If you want to find more of my bonsai projects, check out the description. I'll link to my website, my social media, my other work with the Puget Sound Bonsai channel for their YouTube, and not all of my projects make it to this channel. So if you want to see more, that's where you find it. Lastly, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and stay safe out there. Bonsai on. Hey, go get it.